You can start us off whenever you want.
Okay, the first question. When you were a young child, what did you look like?
Go ahead, answer.
Go ahead.
I was a little white-haired boy. That where we lived on Burton Avenue in South Salt Lake was open fields, and I had a few pictures there of me running in the cheap grass that was white. It made me look like a little white-haired boy. We had animals, we had goats.
Oh, wow.
I raised rabbits when I was a little older.
Did help. What did you look like? That was it.
What did you look like?
So, after the rest.
I always felt like when I don't remember much when I was real young, but when I was like in the 4th and 5th grades, I felt like I was really skinny. I felt like my legs were real skinny, and I always wished that they would get fatter.
People usually wish the opposite.
Okay. What is the very first thing you remember? Ever.
As a child,
Yeah.
that I had a happy life. I loved my parents. They struggled through life, but I lived in a good neighborhood that was economically, you would say that it was a poor neighborhood, but everybody struggled, but we were all friends, even though we were all of different backgrounds, religions, everything.
Awesome.
The first thing that I have in my memory of when I was younger is I lived in Idaho with some family, and I don't know who they were. My dad sent me up there because he couldn't take care of me because my mother had left when I was born, and they took care of me. And I remember walking with them with cows down this road, and they would milk the cows, and I remember that smell of the cows.
Was it a bad smell?
No, it was a good smell. I just remember, and I remember that at one time, one of the girls that lived there threw a rock at me, and hit me right here, and I have a birthmark right here. And when I was younger, I always told everybody that's where they hit me with a rock.
I like that. Awesome. Okay. So you don't want to do this one? You did start it.
You can do whatever.
Okay. So where did you live? And just tell us about like the house and neighborhood, how many people lived in your house, and things like that.
Do you want me to speak first?
Okay. We lived in the same house that I had lived in all until I went through till the 10th grade, and then we built a new home. But we lived there, and it had 2 bedrooms. My dad had the 1 bedroom, and us 4 girls had the small bedroom, and it was smaller than what my bedroom is in here. And we had 2 bunk beds. There was enough room for the bunk beds, and 2 of us slept in the bottom, and 2 of us slept on the top. We had the 4 girls. We didn't have a window or anything in it, and then it had a dresser in there, and that's all we had. That we lived there until my dad got married to his second wife, and then he built onto the house.
Wow. Do you remember what area that was
I lived in the same house that my sister Lorene is living in now.
Oh.
Only she's completely remodeled the home. But when I was younger, that's the house that we lived in.
Is that the one by us?
And it's right there on 2140
Okay,
South,
yeah.
on 34 East.
Wow. That's awesome. Okay.
I was born in South Salt Lake on Burton Avenue, 2460 South. And it was just west of Main Street, and there was a lot of open fields. The water table was very high. You could dig about 2 feet and you'd see water. Because the sewer was not in the area yet, we had to have an outhouse. But we were in a chicken coop that was moved to the property and put on a foundation, and it probably wasn't any bigger than this whole kitchen of ours, not counting the family room. And it was divided into 4s. There was 3 boys and then my sister, who was born later, and they added on to that little house. They put a furnace in there, put a bathroom in where our bedroom was, and so things changed significantly there. I was probably about 10 years old, or maybe 8 to 10 years old when this happened. But it was a happy home. My brother Bill was 8 years old and contacted rheumatic fever, and he was 8 and he passed away at 14 because of the rheumatic fever. Ruined his heart, and he became skin and bones and passed away one Sunday afternoon while after our church. And it was such a beautiful day, and the kids were flying a kite, and he wanted to go outside, which he could hardly walk because he was skin and bones. Anyway, he walked over there maybe a half a block or so, and had a heart attack and died. My father had a 36 Ford, rushed over there. We could drive right out on the area they were flying a kite. Took him to the hospital on 21st South and State Street, and they pronounced him dead there. So we had a funeral, and he was a healthy boy up until he was 8 years old.
How old were you when he died?
I was, 14. I was about 11 and a half to 12.
Okay.
Wow.
And what do you remember moving back with your dad? How old you were? From the Idaho place, or?
I don't remember, but I think I was around 2 or 3.
Oh, okay.
And I remember when I first came back there, I was sitting on the front porch, and a big spider came and climbed up my leg.
Oh.
Bad
Terrible
way to
memory.
start
Great
it
big
off.
round garden spider.
Oh. Okay, this one's interesting. Were you ever punished, and how were you punished?
Well, I'll say I had to chop wood because we had coal stove and started wood. We cooked on a coal stove. We had a potbelly stove in the little front room that we had. And sometimes I didn't want to chop wood. And so I'd sneak over into the other chicken coop we had and take some of the chopped wood that was in there and filled it up and brought out. Well, Mom, I got the wood done, but she got onto that pretty good. And so she made me stay in the house and not be able to sleep out in the summertime. We had nice trees. Our neighbors had big old popular trees that shaded us and everything. But or there was a few things like that, you know, as a boy, you'd like to be mischievous.
That's funny.
Well, I was raised with three older sisters, and I was kind of I was the youngest, so lots of times they were very nice to me. And when I say they, we had different ladies that would come in our home and take care of us. And sometimes they were really mean to my sisters. They would go out and get willows from the willow tree, and they would get whipped with the willows. And then when my dad would come home and he would see the willows, he would get really angry and break them all up and throw them away. But I never did ever get spanked with the willows because I was the youngest and I was kind of favored. So, but they were mean, real mean to my sisters.
Like nannies, that kind of.
They were actually housekeepers. They stayed at our house.
Okay.
They lived at our house, and there was this one lady that was really. I always thought she was really mean, and her name was Delta Huntsman, and she sang in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And one time when she was there, she took me to the World's Fair. And I don't remember. I think it was in San Francisco or someplace.
Oh, wow.
And I remember going, and all my other sisters didn't get to go. And I remember some other episodes like that when they would make my sisters go outside and stay outside when they had company, and I could come in the house.
Wow.
You know, and it made me feel bad that they would do this. We had to also go and fill the coal at night, fill the coal bucket at night, and chop the wood and make sure that was all filled before we went to bed.
So did your sisters like resent you at all for that?
I
or
don't think they never
really?
showed resentment to me that I remember.
That's good.
Maybe they just thought of me as this little child
Yeah. So I didn't think
too.
so.
I don't know.
That's interesting. Okay, what types of recreation did you enjoy? Did you go swimming, fishing, skating, camping, traveling, things like that?
The only thing that we did was go camping. My dad liked to camp, and he would take us up to the canyon. And when we got up to the canyon, we went hiking. We hiked the whole time we were up at the canyon. We didn't just sit. We went hiking. And that's what I thought everybody did. I thought when you went to the mountains, you hiked. And I can remember walking on those water lines, going down there sometimes because I felt like it was easier to walk on them than to walk in the dirt. But yeah, that's what we did. We hiked. We went to up to the canyon and hiked. That's the only thing I ever remember doing as a young girl.
Did you enjoy it, or was it?
Oh yeah, you enjoyed it
Yeah.
because you got to have soda pop and I guess I don't know what else we had.
That's fun.
We always had family gatherings. It was a very close family. My uncle Otto and my dad were real close brothers, and they lived in Bountiful, and I loved to go up there in the summertime, stay over there because they had peach trees and cherry trees, apricots and things. But my uncle said, now don't you eat too many of those peaches and too many, otherwise you gotta go home, because I was sitting on the toilet for all day long, he said. And so I couldn't eat anymore. But I loved that. And my cousin, Ron, he was a really close friend. And anyway, we had a lot of Dutch people come to our home. They spoke Dutch, and my mother's sisters came over. They all spoke Dutch, but my mother always said that we have to learn to speak English and not. And so they wanted the families when they came over to speak English too, so we would know too. But in this small home, we packed them in, and anyway, we had many, many gatherings our whole life.
That's fun.
I'm just going to.
And came over. They would speak Dutch, and as long as we weren't home, she would speak Dutch too with them. But she had one brother, and he drowned at age 19 over in Holland. But so she only had 3 other sisters, and we always went visiting to their home occasionally too.
Okay, what household chores did you have to do?
Everything. I remember mopping our floor, but because we had a coal stove, the floor would get really, really dirty, you know, because you have that coal and it goes all over. And I remember another thing that I used to love to do, and that was in the stove, there was this little thing that was about 2 inches high and probably about 10 inches long. And you'd open it up, it was a door, and then you put this thing in there and you scrape out all this soot from the coal stove. That was my favorite thing to do.
Why did you like that?
Huh?
Why did you like that?
I just thought that was fun to dig all that out and clean it all out.
That's funny.
You get all kinds of soot on you.
Oh, I didn't get soot on me. I was always cleaning the bathrooms and cleaning the kitchen. And I remember going over to my friend's house and cleaning her kitchen and cleaning her bathroom for her.
That's funny.
My chores were, when I was 10 years old, they wanted my brother to have the paper route, and he couldn't do it because he had the rheumatic fever. So I was about almost 10 and a half, 11 years old, and you're supposed to be 12. But anyway, I had the paper route for about 3 years, and I had an old bike that was terrible, and finally I saved them enough to buy a Swin bicycle. Cost $32 then, and it took me a year to do that before my other bike broke down. But as soon as I talked to my mother that I wanted to quit, when I was going to school over at the Madison Junior High, I was in the 8th grade, and my dad had gone on a mission and left us as a family, and he went back to Holland for 2 years, and my mother had never worked outside the home, and she had to go work at the Granite School kitchen and walked in the morning and walked back at night. When I had the paper out, I'd see her walk, and if there was things I had to eat school lunch, I worked at the school lunch also, and so I got the free lunch. But when my mother came home working for the Granite School head kitchen, that's where they made everything and then brought it in, and I had to eat school lunch over again. And I sure got tired of school lunch, but
Twice.
she worked hard, and I always had money, and she taught me that as long as my dad was on a mission, she divided whatever I earned halfway, and then I had to pay the full 10% tithing, and then the rest she put into a kind of a savings account. And anyway, I always had a few dollars to spend, and everybody loved me after I went on the paper route because I always had pocket change, and they loved that. I could go to the store and buy things.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of friends on my paper route.
That's fun. Okay, was your mom a good cook? What are some things she would cook you for dinner? Some of your favorite things?
Well, when I was younger, of course, there wasn't a mother in the home. So my older sister always cooked everything. And she fixed a lot. I mean, she always fixed good meals. We always had a nice meal at night.
Mm-hmm.
Potatoes and gravy and a vegetable. And we always ate a real good meal. We didn't have many desserts, though. We didn't make desserts. that was kind of an extra thing with us. We didn't have people come over because there just wasn't, we didn't have relatives come over because there wasn't any relatives really that came over and visited. So we never did make desserts. I remember once in a while my sister would make a cake, and then lots of times we'd eat it before it was cooked, just in a cup.
The batter?
Yeah.
I love batter.
Yeah.
Would she make like chicken a lot, or was it mostly like just veggies and potatoes?
It was probably potatoes and gravy and a meat. My dad always went hunting, so we always had deer meat. And when we didn't have deer meat, then he bought meat, but we always had potatoes and gravy and a meat and a vegetable and a salad.
Oh, nice.
That's what we always had every night, but no desserts.
That's interesting.
My mother was a very good cook, but nothing extravagant. But in Holland, potatoes was the main crop that they grew during the wartime. Potatoes was huge. The church had made sure that everybody grew potatoes, even in a small plot. And during the war, it was something. But I had to eat foods maybe that I didn't like sprouts, Brussels sprouts, and yet that's all we had sometimes. But we always had people for dinner, or on Sundays, or we invited people from our ward. See, sacrament meeting always started at 6 o'clock, and it got through around 7:38, and that's when we ate our dinner. Very seldom during the day, because you start at 10 o'clock for a priesthood meeting, then you had to wait till 10 o'clock for your Sunday school, and then you'd go home. Sometimes you'd eat, or sometimes you wouldn't. But it was very enjoyable because we had really some real good friends, and they came over, and we had great times as a family, just sitting around a table about this big, and there was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us at least, and so it was a very good time.
Did you get sick of potatoes?
Never.
Oh,
I love mashed potatoes and gravy on almost every meal. I love gravy.
Well, your mother didn't mash potatoes. She would cook them, and then the Dutch way, they would dump all the water out of the pan and then let them dry out in the pan. That's how the Dutch people fixed them. They didn't mash them.
So were they soft, or?
Huh? Yeah, they were soft, but they were just still potatoes,
Yeah.
but kind of fuzzy.
Well, she cut them up.
Huh?
Sometimes she cut them up.
Well, that's what I mean. They were cut up, but they weren't mashed.
Well, they're potatoes.
And that's the way she fixed them. That was new to me when I went over there. That's the way she fixed potatoes. She didn't put mashed potatoes.
Okay, were you ever really sick at any point in your life? Did you ever break a bone, get your tonsils out? Things like
None of the above.
that. Wow, good for you.
When I was about 10 years old, I got tonsillitis. And they used all these old witches' brews and stuff. And in the mornings and in the nights, tonsillitis was really bad. And they used to put stuff all over and brush my gums and my teeth. And I was terribly sick. And it took about 3 to 4 weeks before I finally got it over. And they said that as soon as you get better, then we're going to have those tonsils out. So they did. And after that, I got right back to my health. And I was very active. But I don't think I ever broke anything, except riding my bikes. I fell down enough.
If we ever had a sore throat, they would take a rag, maybe like a washcloth or something, and smear Vicks all on it and wrap that around your throat. And sometimes you had to go to school with that on. With this big rag around your throat and smell like Vicks.
You'd leave it on the whole day? You wouldn't take it off?
Mm-hmm.
Very obedient of you. That's
Well,
interesting.
That's what all the kids did.
Any other weird, like, natural things or you can remember?
Didn't you sit on scissors that you had to like? Wasn't it a big deal?
Sit on scissors?
I remember my mom telling me that. You sat on sewing scissors.
She did what?
Didn't you sit on some sewing scissors you didn't know were on the chair?
Oh, I did one time. What was that when I was in the working at college, and it was in a chair that like that, Grandpa's chair, and it was poking up the side, and with the scissors like this. And I sat on it, and that feeling going into the fat in your leg.
Did you have to get stitches?
No, but I
Oh,
didn't have a tetanus shot.
Did you have to, they had to look at your bum?
No, it didn't keep bleeding.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's see. As a teenager, how did you get along with your parents?
I always got along really good. I never had any problems. And by then, my dad had loved this lady that he married. I really did. She was like a mother to me, and never having a mother, I really loved her.
And how old were you when they were
I
married?
was 10 when they got married.
Okay. So you remember life without her?
Well, that's what I really remember mostly. All these things happened before they got married. After they got married, things changed a real lot. And then we built a new home next door from where we were. And there was, it was bigger, and but my older sisters left. They got married and left. So they were probably gone when we lived in the other house. It was just me and Sally. And then I had younger sisters that were born to Marge. She had 2 daughters, Lorene and Lois, and then they had Billy. So.
And I got along good with my parents. My dad was gone though, and he came back, I think, when I was about 14. But he went and watched me play baseball, basketball. He'd even drive to Ogden, Provo, and watch me play. And that's before freeways. And he had an old, I think it was about a 41 Plymouth when he got back from, you never bought new cars, you bought good used cars that were not much anything. He would be the only one. He'd drive all there, and I remember playing Ogden High School. He was up there in the stands, and nobody was in the whole stands because it was a wintry day, and he drove anyway in the snow.
That's awesome.
And you guys would take the bus?
Yeah, we'd go as, they always usually had buses for us.
Okay.
When did you move away from home and why?
When we got married,
Both of you.
yes. We got married at a very young age.
I went up to Utah State.
And I had a scholarship there for 2 years, but because we had Sherry Lynn was born, and we stayed there 2 years, and then we came back to Salt Lake thinking that I'd go to the university, and I did for 2 quarters, but children where Jill was born, and in between that we had an infant child pass away,
And that was up in Logan.
right.
When we were living in Logan, we had a little girl named Deborah that passed away.
So we had a very difficult time. We lived in an old converted garage with a coal stove, and cost $15 a month. And we had a hard time earning enough $15 to pay it. And this gentleman was still very good, but he said, "Why you not pay the rent?" He was German descent. He was a wonderful man, though.
So 15 total for the rent? I thought that was just the stove rental or something.
$15 for the rent.
And then we had to buy the coal, and he had to come in. If we went home for the weekend, which we did on some occasions, we didn't have a car the first year, and we lived below the campus, and they had miserable cold winters up there. I had to walk from there, clear up the hill, and across the quad. That's what they called the open space where the grass was. And my first class, 8 o'clock in the morning. And then the next year, we moved out of that and went to they were barracks. They were military barracks through the
The
years.
barracks they had upstairs.
Yeah, and we lived in the second floor,
But they
right
were-
where the furnace was.
Yeah, but they weren't barracks. They were just
Well,
housing.
Yeah, well, okay, whatever you want to call it. They were places to stay. They were just blocked, and they weren't built quality or anything. They tore all that stuff out. But anyway, yeah,
We had a lot of friends up there.
we played cards and games and
We had a lot of good
Yeah.
times.
whatever little money we scraped up, like peanuts and just had a fun time on the weekends.
Never had a refrigerator.
Really?
Or
Wow.
we had a hot plate. We
Right.
didn't have a refrigerator. We'd have to put stuff in a box outside the window, outside.
It was cold enough to freeze everything.
What would you do in the summer?
We came to
We
Salt
came to Salt Lake.
Oh.
and worked. And I always worked construction and putting in pipelines and gas lines and I knew fellows that I went to school with and so forth. Their parents on like Tempest Construction Company. If you've seen that pipeline that's over here on about 6 West or something, they have a business right there. And I went over there to see Mr. Tempest, and he wasn't there, and I said, "Well, I'm Corny VanRy. I'm Richard's friend." And I says, "Tell him I need a job." And he came over that afternoon and said be to work the next day.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
That's nice.
that's the kind of help we had to, struggle as we were just young couples. But then we I finally dropped out of school because of children. We had to go to work full time. So, and eventually we got a home here, just west of the canal. Lived there 11 years, and then built this home. And Carolyn was born over at that house, and the little storage room that was connected to that house, we went ahead
And that was where Tracy slept.
tore the wall out.
And Tracy slept in that little room. Carolyn always had
Did
slept
she?
in a crib with the other girls. There was 2 in each room. And then she would sleep in a crib in their room, and she was a horrible baby. And at night, I would just let her cry, and they had to get up and take care of her.
I've never heard that she was a bad baby.
Oh, she was terrible, baby.
Yeah, but
Cried a lot until she was like about 2 when she could get around and walk and that. Then she got so she wasn't bad at all, but
Yeah.
as a baby she cried a lot.
But then you went to work and one of the neighbors tended her, and just like neighbors do, you know, she loved her neighbor.
Oh.
Remember?
Well, that was until,
Thompson?
yeah.
Well, he's gonna edit. So when you edit, you take all the swear words out.
Let's see, where was she? Okay, so what were all your children's names and how were each of them as a baby?
Well, first was Lynn, Sherry Lynn. I had wanted to name her Lynn, and Corey agreed with me that then when we put Sherry with him, with the Lynn, then he decides he likes Sherry Lynn, so he's used Sherry Lynn a lot, and I still call her Lynn.
I only know her as Lynn. So.
And the next little girl that we had, its name was Deborah, and I'm thinking we didn't have a middle name for her, did we? It was just Deborah.
Yeah, just Deborah.
And then after her, we
And how long did she live?
Passed away.
She only lived probably for a short time. Corny was up in Logan, and I was staying at his folks' house because I had been having some bleeding, and then it really started, really heavy bleeding, and I had that previa,
She was
previa.
bedridden for
And I couldn't get up at all. Corny's mother had to come kind of and help me. We were living at her house. And I couldn't even get out because I was bleeding so heavily. And the doctor really said I should have been in the hospital. We didn't have any insurance or anything, you know. So then about 7 months, I had her. I started in labor. And it was a wintry night. Corny had been there. And then he'd gone back to Logan. And I started having really bad pain. So his mom and dad took me to the hospital. I always remember his dad thought he had to carry me into the hospital. It was really embarrassing to me because I didn't think he should carry me to the hospital. So anyway, yeah, we went to the hospital and she was born and she only lived a day.
Okay.
She would have lived if they had the things that they have nowadays, you know.
So she was just premature. That's
It was just she was too premature. And actually, he was really surprised that I didn't need a blood transfusion because he knew how much, my doctor knew how much I was bleeding, how much blood there had been, and he thought for sure I would have had to have a blood transfusion, but I didn't. And then we had Lynn, Jill, Joni, Jill. And Jill, her name is Jill Jeanette VanRy. Jeanette is after Corny's sister, Jeanette. We both loved her a real lot, and so we named Jill after her. And then after Jill, we had Joni, and her name is Joni Lee. When we went to the hospital and had her, when I came out of the delivery room, and the nurse told Corny that it was another girl, he was kind of sad, and she got really upset with him. He said, "But I wanted a boy." And she told him that he should just be happy that he had a healthy girl. And then Corny said to me, "Well, we'll name her after you." So we named her Joni after me, but it's Joni Lee,
So where's Lee from?
just to go with Joni.
Okay.
Then we had Corey Ann, and that was right after we had bought our home over here.
Okay.
And Corny's mom and I came out here every day. We'd get in the car. Corny would bring us out here when he would go to work. And I was pregnant with Corey Ann. And he'd bring his mom and I out here, and we would stay out to the house. Didn't have any heat in it or anything, and we would paint sand and paint and everything. That's the way that we could get the house if we did the painting.
Mm.
So we did that, and as soon as we got into the house, we'd only been in there a week, and my water broke. And so we went over. The road wasn't good in there or anything. We had to go over to a neighbor's house and call my doctor and tell him that my water had broken. And he said, "Well, you get to the hospital." And so we went right to the hospital, and she was born, and she was 2 months early.
Okay.
And she passed away. And then, who did we have next? Lynn, Jill, Joni, Corey, and then Corey.
Corey was born, and then Steve.
Yeah, we had Corey, and he was Corey the third. And then we had Stephen, and Stephen was only about a year after Corey. And Corey, when Dad came home from the hospital, he says, "Now you're going to name him Corey the fourth?" We named him Stephen, and he only lived a day. And actually, he weighed 6 pounds, 6 ounces. So I mean, he was plenty big.
Yeah.
It's just that his lungs weren't developed, and so he passed away.
Did they ever let you take them home from the hospital, or did they all pass away in the
No, they
hospital?
passed away within a day or two.
Mm.
Actually, there was a lady that was a nurse up at the hospital when I had Stephen, and she was a friend of ours, a family. You know, she had lived in our ward, and she came in to me and she said, "You know, you really should maybe have your husband come up and give him a blessing because he keeps turning blue." So when I talked to Corey, which was, later, I told him that, but I think he passed away then.
All those babies born were blessed before they passed away, and they're all. When we went through the temple, 18 years later it took us, but they were all sealed to us.
Oh, that's cool.
That's
So
awesome.
you can see how many children we had with all around the ceiling
Oh, yeah.
area.
And
The
then,
only one born into the covenant was Billy, because she was pregnant with Billy.
when we went to the temple, I was 7 months pregnant.
So
Then after Stephen, then we had Lynn, and then we had Jill, and I kept thinking I was going to go have Jill early. Not Jill, Tracy. I always get those two. Tracy. We went to the hospital twice with her, but I didn't have her. They were able to stop the contractions.
Oh, that's good.
And Tracy when she was little, looked a lot like Jill.
Mm-hmm.
As babies, they looked a lot alike, only Tracy didn't ever have any hair. She had very, very little slim hair. And when she got about 2 or 3, she went and was looking at the pictures, baby pictures and family pictures, and she found this picture of Jill, and she brought it in. She said to me, "Here I am with my hair."
Just wanted hair.
She has good hair now.
So then we got pregnant with Billy, and we went through the temple when we were 7 months. When we were 7 months along, we went through the temple with Billy and took all the kids through.
That's awesome.
Okay, what are some of your favorite memories of your family life when your children were growing up?
they were good.
Yeah, we were
We
always.
loved them.
Yeah,
That's what keeps marriages together, is family. Because we had a tough time. And sometimes I think we have a tough time now. But we've made it 65 years. And anyway, we loved our children. We did the best we can. We took them on trips as when they were small. And then finally, when Billy was playing baseball, we followed him around. That was always our holidays.
Yeah.
We went to Carson City and watched him play baseball, and we went to Albuquerque and watched him play baseball, and Las Vegas.
And we took a motor home and took them when they were small. And the only one that was left behind was Billy because he was too young. Steve and
Lynn and Steve
Lynn and Steve
were married at that time,
Yeah,
and they
and we went to San Francisco, Lake Tahoe, and all the way down the coastline, Highway 1, and to Disneyland, and then we went to Marineland, and then back up to Zion's Canyon, and took Highway 89 instead of 91 home, and had a great time in the motorhome, and it never broke down, which was amazing.
That's awesome. Okay, are there any things that you did to raise your kids that your parents did for you that you wanted to do for your kids? Anything that you did or didn't do because you didn't like how your parents did it?
When I was younger, I probably could have done anything that I wanted. After my dad remarried, I could go with my friends or anything. I didn't have a lot of restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a girlfriend who was very restricted. She couldn't do this or she couldn't do that. And sometimes I felt like maybe she was more loved than me.
Really?
Because I felt like, I could do anything I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really cared what time I came home or where I went or what I did, And then when I got married and had kids of my own, I was a little bit more strict than maybe I should have been. But because I'd always think, what would Mrs. Pincock do? This is how I'm going to be like Mrs. Pincock, because she was very strict with my girlfriend.
And your girlfriend probably thought you had it great.
That's so funny. How many grandkids do you have now?
We have 30. I think we have 30. I think we have 33. I was counting that we had 35. I think that was when Billy was married to Heather. Well, and that's hard to know. The ones that we've had, I think we've got 33. And then there's others, but I don't know how to add those on.
Yeah.
Because Jason's had kids and
Mm-hmm.
another marriage, and like I said, Billy was married to Heather, and she had 3 kids, and so I don't know if you count those or not. They're not married anymore, so.
Yeah. So around there.
Yeah, and we have 67 great-grandchildren, but we'll probably have more because Kelly's pregnant, and I'm expecting you guys to have some. Somebody else is pregnant. Oh, Bobby's pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
And Nikki wants to have more,
Yeah.
and Ashley wants to have more, so I don't know. Ashley's had a hard time getting pregnant. I don't know if she ever will.
Okay. So now,
I skipped around.
you did skip around?
I was kind of just going with the flow.
Okay. Do you know what you want to do? This one stopped recording in the middle of the grandparents, so gotta make sure it's still recording. Or the grandkids, and you're talking about that. Okay, I think it's still good, yeah.
Dating life.
For who? Our kids?
How old were you when you started dating? And tell us about your first date.
She probably came over to the ballpark when I was playing.
No, that wasn't our first date. Our first date, he called and asked me to go to the Boys and Girls Club to a dance.
Oh, that's a date, yeah.
And with his friend Raymond Gunn, and his date, and I don't remember who he had, but that's where we went. And then while we were at the dance, he asked my best friend to go to the next school dance.
Oh, wow.
Whoopee!
It's in the history
She'll
books
never
now.
forget. Well, that's funny.
And she never did ever say anything to me. She was my very best friend, and she never did say anything. And I kept saying, "Oh, I hope Corny asked me to the dance.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
Corny asked me to the
I
dance." And
don't
she,
even remember. That's blocked out of my whole memory. I don't even remember.
Okay, well,
So you went to the same school at that time?
we always went to the same school from the first grade through
Oh, okay.
through 12th.
So how old, like what grade were you in when you started hanging out?
14.
14. What did you think of each other after your first date? You wanted him to ask you to the next dance.
Yeah, I would really liked him, but
She was dating another.
you know, I mean 14 because we always went out with kids. They didn't have that thing where you wait till you're 16
Really?
when we were younger. We went to all the school dances and when we were in junior high. And of course we were at a younger, smaller school. We knew everybody. And yeah, it was just,
We had about 90 kids in junior high, 9th grade graduate. We had it over at the church.
Wow.
They don't let you go to churches.
Yeah, I was going to say the church. That's funny.
So how old were you when you were seriously dating? Exclusively.
probably 16.
And you're in the same grade. You're the same grade. What would be like your normal date or hangout that you would do together?
Riding my bicycle.
He'd ride his bicycle over and we'd go
And her on
and
the
he'd take me on the bicycle.
handlebars.
On the handlebars.
Oh, that's fun.
To his ball games.
Oh, that's fun.
That is fun.
Yeah, I played baseball this summer.
Yeah. He always played baseball.
Where were the fields? Where was the ballpark?
There was one, Harmony Park was on Main Street and about 34 South. I don't even know I think it is still there. It's a dumpy place.
Well, and then we went up to the one by Liberty Park. It was up on the
Oh, yeah.
southeast corner.
Ninth
Liberty Park.
East and 7th.
It's still there.
Is there
Yeah.
still
Oh,
a park
yeah, it
there?
It is still
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, we used to play a lot there.
Yeah, he'd ride me on his bike up
And
there.
we,
It
let's
was
see,
fun riding on the handlebars.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think where. Oh, we played some in Holiday.
Yeah.
We played out of Magna. We played some out there.
We didn't go on play.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope you didn't ride the handlebars.
Like a marathon. How did he propose to you?
Just,
We were just always together.
yeah.
I was pregnant, so.
So you decided to get married. How long, once you decided to get married, until you got married?
A very long time. It was very difficult at our age. We didn't
Yeah.
have money. We
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
have things.
Yeah. And it was hard for him especially to tell his parents. And I was probably 6 months along when we got married.
Okay. And how old were you?
17.
17.
So your parents were more relaxed?
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, I could probably do what I wanted. And
Yeah.
my folks really thought a lot of Corny.
Oh, okay.
My dad really liked him, and so they were really impressed with him.
So that's life in the big ladies.
Okay. When and where was your wedding? What did you wear?
It wasn't a big deal.
It was a marriage in our
It was
home.
over at his folks' house. It
A
wasn't a big
bishop
deal.
married us.
And his bishop married us.
Were you wearing a dress?
I wore a dress, but it was a borrowed dress from my friend.
Oh. Was it like poofy?
No, it just had,
We
it was, didn't have shoulders.
Strapless?
It was strapless and then it had a little jacket.
Okay. What day did you get married?
April 11th, 1953.
Okay. Did you know how to cook when you were first married?
I think I thought I did. And I just felt like I could fix anything.
Yeah, you just, I think, never mind.
You didn't think it was delicious?
Well, we didn't have
No.
a lot of money at
Oh.
first, to even fix things, so it was hard. And then we got married longer and got working jobs. We, could buy more things, and I always liked to make bread.
He's a good bread maker. Okay, let's see. What's something that we have now that you didn't have when you were married that you are glad to have now?
The microwave,
Yes, that's very nice.
refrigerator.
I can't believe you have a refrigerator.
When we got married, we didn't have anything.
No, we didn't have anything.
When
We
we-
could put everything that we had in the car to come home.
When
We
we-
could put everything that we had in the car to come home.
Yeah.
And we had a crib and a high chair, folding high chair. And we could get that all in the car.
a 2-door car.
So we really didn't have a lot.
Wow.
And then we blew up the engine and had to get rid of it
That car.
and buy another car. Going to Logan.
Is the canyon? Was it in the canyon or?
No, it was in Willard. Willard's off of the,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Where
the old
the-
highway.
Yeah, before you get to Brigham City, to go through it was before then.
You go through the Peachtree country
Yeah.
and there, and we stopped and.
And it was on
and
Easter Sunday.
And there's no cell phones.
Oh yeah.
That they didn't have cell phones. I went across the street, knocked on the door, and there was a highway patrolman lived there, and we asked him that we broke down. And anyway, he let us in and used the phone. We called Salt Lake. My dad came and towed it with his car and wrote, but I think they drove us to Logan first, and then came back, got the car and towed it. And
Yeah, and you took me to Logan first.
yeah. Then Sherry Lynn was born, so Sherry Lynn was in the car.
Yeah, it was an Easter.
Right.
And she had a real pretty little real pretty dress on that I'd made.
Did you have air conditioning back then in the cars?
Oh no,
Really?
that was later, much later.
Now
But
this-
I always did have a sewing machine because my mother and dad had given us a sewing machine when we got married.
yeah.
So I always had a sewing machine. I always made all my kids' clothes.
Wow.
Where would you get your fabric from?
Well, you'd have to buy it, but yeah.
Cheaper.
Do you remember the name of the store? It wasn't like Joann's.
No, there wasn't a Joann's. It was probably Penny's or,
Oh, okay.
yeah, probably Penny's.
Like J.C. Penney's?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing you have to realize, when you have a little baby, like Sherry Lynn, and just like Addie
Mm-hmm.
over there, they're the most beautiful children born and raised that you would never give up. There's a love that is so precious, and when we took her to school with us, she was amazing. But she did get sick that one year. We took her down to the doctor. There was a Budge clinic, and the doctor was there. He never charged us anything, and he
Wow.
told her what to do, and I think gave us the medicine for it. Never billed us. I mean, people were really, really wonderful when we were doing things. But to earn money there, I refereed basketball games for churches, do 4 a night, get $4. 4 getting $1 a day.
Hey, you almost pay for your rent with the $4.
Well, and then later when we moved up in the college apartments, he worked at the pool hall.
Yeah,
at
the
college,
Union
The
Building.
Union Building, and used to make a lot of money betting on the pool games and play.
I got
Made
that.
pretty good money that way.
Whatever
Just got to
worked.
be a really good pool player.
One Friday night, for instance, we were playing for quarters. There's 4 or 5 of us in playing, and you play 9-ball.
Well, he worked there too.
Okay, yeah.
And so, anytime you got the 9-ball in, that winner he got the 4 quarters.
Mhm.
I won $9.25 or
Dang.
75 that
And
night.
he'd come home and give me the money. I'd go,
No, that night we said, we're going to Salt Lake.
oh, did we?
So we took our Chevy down to the gas station, filled it up. Gas was cheap, cost us $5 for a full tank. We could drive to Salt Lake and back and still have
Mhm.
gas left over. So then we went to the Arctic Circle in Brigham City, and you could buy hamburgers and French fries and everything for about $2.50.
We never ever thought to stop at any place and get a hamburger.
This is
But that's the
special.
whole point.
Yeah.
We only seen one picture show in a movie house in the 2 years we were there.
Wow.
We couldn't afford anything.
What movie? What was worth it?
I don't know. I don't have a clue. I can't remember that. But anyway,
Wow.
and then she went home early both years to get a job and worked. And I stayed up there for at least 6 weeks,
Yeah.
longer until school was out. But I hitchhiked. I got out on the highway. That was the worst thing ever because I tell you, you'd get a ride to Brigham City, and they said, "Well, this is as far as I'm going," or they'd go to Ogden, let you off, say, "I got to go to Ogden." You're still on the other road, so you're not going to Ogden. And then you'd go someplace. It'd take about 4 or 5 rides to get home.
Wow.
It was.
Yeah, and they would pick, kids up then. You didn't worry about that they were going to kill you if you picked them up.
Yeah.
True.
I'll tell you though, when I was working as a salesman, I had to go up there, and it was a snowy, rainy deal coming back. There was a fellow on the highway thumbing, and man, he was weird. I wish I'd never
Really?
picked him up. But anyway, I drove faster than I'd ever driven anybody. I said, if he's gonna do anything, I said, he's gonna go with me.
How old were you then? Around.
I was 23
Okay.
when I started salesman's job. I worked for Golden Grain Macaroni Company.
How old are you?
24.
So it was a great job, but they sold it after I'd been there 20 years. They sold the company. Things changed.
So what did you do for them?
I
Just
was-
sales?
Well,
No, he was the manager.
I worked in the grocery store. I did hardwood floors, and that's how we got our house. I did 3 extra hardwood floors over there, plus our house. And while I was going to school up to the U, I would do hardwood floors after I got out of. But the hardwood floor business went out, and then people started just putting carpet over plain old board,
Yeah, but all those houses over there have
But the government made them put hardwood floors in until they changed that rule, the FHA rules. So anyway, that's how I earned money. So when it started going out of business, And I finished them too, sanded them and did that kind of work after hardwood floors was slow enough. I went to work at the grocery store on 3400 South State Street. It's a Chinese business now. It's in the same building, just completely remodeled. And that
On
was,
39th South. And
Is that the one that has the Chinese thing you drive
that
under?
used to be a Grand Central, and it really did
it
well
was
as
the
a Grand
biggest
Central store.
grocery store in
Yeah.
Utah.
Okay.
And it had one half section was non-foods, drugstores, and the other was grocery. And I worked in the frozen food department, stocking, and we sold tons and tons of frozen foods. That was a big industry. And anyway, if one of the salespeople came in, he said, "Do you want to work part-time for me stocking shelves, after you get through at the store?" So I did, after I'd gone full-time. And a year later, stocking shelves, he said, "Come work for me as a full-time salesman." He worked just 2 more years, and then he planned to quit, and he let me call on all of the head buyers and anybody of any importance. And here I am, 25 years old. And anyway, my boss, when he quit, my boss flew into town and stayed with me about a week. And he said, "I gotta check things out." And he said, "But I don't think I'll hire you. You're too young. You don't know what you're doing, And I said, "Well, go check all of the buyers and all the key accounts you want to, and just have them check me out,
Yeah.
When he came back after being a week, he said, "I didn't find anything that said that you were bad, that everybody commended you for taking over for your boss and everything's running smooth, and our sales." And then we had a little warehouse too. And so I had to hire another salesman and a truck driver, and I hired a gal to come in. I hired one fella that stole from me, and then when I found out he stole from me, he left town, and then he worked, and he only worked part-time for me, but he worked for one of the big food
Who was that?
companies, so can't remember his
Not
name.
Blaine.
Oh, no. He was a truck driver from Kennecott. But anyway, we kept it going. We got our sales up there very well. Then we moved about 4 other times to bigger warehouses. And then they sold out. And her brother, Billy, he was just a teenager, 16 years. I hired him to come work part-time, and then he full-time when he got out of school. And he ended up staying with the company because they had a big warehouse and they used it as a shipping area. And so he stayed with them, and I put them all on profit sharing, so they all got, good retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a first in that, because usually you had to be in the union or you had to, but anyway, we were just non-union, just a group of guys, truck drivers, salespeople. We treated everybody the same, so everything worked out good.
And they sold, you said like 20 years later, they sold
Yeah.
the company to someone else?
Yeah, there was 3 Italian brothers, and they had a plant in Seattle and one in San Leandro, California. And then they had a small plant in Chicago. And it's because of the Rice-A-Roni company. And it was
Mushroom
worth
oil was such a big thing, and that really helped their
it
company.
was worth about $275 million, but the family owned a lot of outside things. They owned hotels, apartments, property. They were very wealthy, but they didn't have anybody really to carry their name. They had two sons by one of the older brothers, but they weren't good enough to. They were just blowing the money rather than.
They weren't that interested in preserving the company and that.
And so anyway, that's the reason they said we better sell this before these two kids ruin their company. So they sold it, and they sold it for $275 million, which is not too bad for three fellows. And what they did, they put the money in trust and stock, and every child got $375 million in a trust fund, which would take care of them for their life because, they couldn't touch the money till they were around 25.
Take care of me for life.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever you need. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Have you had any spiritual experiences that you would like to share?
Spiritual experiences when?
Well,
Just any.
when we went through the temple, I had a history of having my babies early. And then I lost the 3 early. And my doctor finally said to me, "Don't go out of town. If you go out of town, you call me and I'll go with you." Of course, I'd had him since my first one. We were almost like good friends too. And when the day we went through the temple, we were in the ceiling room. No, it wasn't when we were in the ceiling room. It was when we were going through the temple, taking out our endowments, and I started having contractions. And I was 7 months pregnant with Billy, and I kept thinking, oh my gosh, are we going to make it through here? And when we were up in the prayer circle, and I just prayed that I would be okay and that this baby would be okay, and my contractions just stopped.
Wow.
Right then.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
That's it. One that I can remember.
Well, to tell you the truth,
You can think of these things later.
Mm-hmm.
at the moment I can't really think of, but there's been a lot of things in my life that have been very spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Going through the temple is a very spiritual experience. Seeing my children sealed and going through the temple it's a wonderful feeling. And then to see Tracy being divorced and finding a fine fellow like Kurt is a blessing. And there's so many blessings in your life that you don't even think. You think everything's for granted, and you don't realize how great the Lord blesses each one of us if we try to do the best we can. And to be a member of the church is a great blessing to have the opportunity. There's a lot of people never have the opportunity to have this and to grasp it and believe in it is amazing. And I think that's where our blessings have come as we maintain. We're not perfect. We're far from perfect. We have our squabbles continually. And yet, it's because she's different, I'm different, she's raised different, I was raised different.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's the reason we're still together.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because of family that makes the difference. We want to be with our families.
That's awesome.
I have a question. Have you ever changed faiths? Like, were you ever a different religion when you were younger? Was your dad LDS?
Oh, he was always LDS.
Okay.
My grandmother,
Okay.
his mom worked in the temple, was a temple worker.
Okay.
And he was always raised in the church. It's just that he kind of swayed a little bit, you know. But he made us go to church when we were younger.
Even when he didn't go?
Huh?
Even when he didn't go?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, he never went that I remember.
Oh, really?
But we had to get up and go. Yeah.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Huh?
Do as I say, not as I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
What would you tell your children about your faith?
About our faith,
Mm-hmm.
you live by example, and you don't try to push them. You know, you just maybe might say things, but you don't do it in a directive way or anything that will take it away from them. Everybody has to find their own way. You know, you can't live on your friend's conversion, or you have to learn to accept it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not I've listened to lesson after lesson, but I'm a lousy reader. And yet I've read the Book of Mormon, and I've read it probably 10 times and start over before I get out of certain areas. But I have read it through, and whenever I hear the lessons, I understand it. But if they ask me a question, I don't know the answer.
That's exactly how it is.
Yeah, that's just the way with me too. And I've read it through at least 3 times, you know, when they've had a challenge to
Mm-hmm.
read it. I've done it. But I don't remember everything that I read. But as I'm reading it, I feel like I'm understanding it.
Yeah.
But I'm not a scholar that I could say what everything means.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I am. I don't think you were never in the military, right?
No, I went to the draft board after we were married. That's to show you. We had a child, and so they put me as 3A, which means you won't be drafted. But at the same time, when I went to Utah State, one of the classes you had to take was military science for 2 years. And so I had to march every Monday.
Really?
Oh, my.
And I had to wear a uniform. And it was in the Army. They had Army and Air Force. And I did take the 2 years military science. I even tried to join, but they didn't pick you. They only pick so many, and you got to be a straight A type, and they interview you and everything. And being married, that I probably wasn't even close to it because they never put my name on the board.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't have wanted to go, but the only thing is, they would pay you, something like $30-$40 a month to be in it, and then you'd be an officer when you get out of college. But you'd have to go to summer camps for 2 years too. So it was an advantage, but I just never made it.
So what wars were you guys alive for?
What?
Were you alive for any wars?
Well, World War II, we were. It was over when we were in the 5th grade.
It was the Korean War that was on. My brother was drafted right straight from the mission. He came home. Missionaries used to go out 2 years and 6 months. 6 months to learn the language. He went to Holland.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked him to stay a couple more months because I think they were getting a new mission president. He stayed on. When he got back, his draft notice had already been there about 2 or 3 days. And if he hadn't showed up, They'd have probably sent somebody to pick him up,
Yeah.
put him in. Anyway, he reported, and he was shipped out to training camp,
Well, we went to
and because he knew, they asked him if he knew any languages, and he said he knows Holland and German. And they said, well, we need some German interpreters, and you probably could pass it, enough. So he took the test, and they sent him to Trieste, Italy. That used to be a four corners. It was a peaceful deal. The Russians you couldn't pass this zone. No war. It was a non-war zone. And so they had different countries stationed in that area to watch everybody. And that's where he went for a while. And then he went back into different areas. He went into Holland, Italy, and all these places. And some of his missionary friends did the same thing. They took the German deal. Instead of going to Korea,
Oh, wow.
they ended up over there. And there's some friends today. Quite a few of them have passed on, but they had a big, steady group.
So they were in Holland on their missions together, then back with the military? That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So was that your brother Jack?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yesterday he fell in the
shower.
Oh, wow.
shower, broke his leg and hip.
Oh my gosh.
I went to see him at Bountiful, but I missed him. They had him in surgery, and he wouldn't be around, by the time he got out. And he wouldn't know who I was anyway, but his wife and two daughters were with him.
Yikes.
I got in a traffic jam where your dad's work is.
Mm-hmm.
That spring.
Warm Springs.
Warm Spring. There was a big accident there, and all the traffic it backed up. And by the time I got there, I made it late.
So were there any things that you guys would have to do different when there was wars going on at home to help the military effort? Anything like
Ration.
Oh yeah, we were at World War II. We could only have one pair or two pair of shoes a year, and
really?
we had they gave us stamps, and we only had we had to use those stamps to buy things, and with what we bought, with what we paid for, we had. But after our stamps were gone, then we couldn't go buy things like two pair of shoes a year, or maybe it was only one pair of shoes a year. I don't know, but things were rationed.
Gasoline was
rationed, and
unless you had a business that you needed extra gas, that's the only ones that got extra.
Yeah, and we used to save
Tinfoil.
We always saved tinfoil.
For
You
the
peel
war.
it off the gum papers and wrap it around and keep getting a bigger and bigger ball. Go out and put it in my dad's thing and wind it around to smash it so it was solid.
Yeah.
What would they use that for? Just
The war.
okay.
Yeah, they took all of those metals, anything they could do, aluminum,
Mm-hmm.
to build things. On 21st South, you see a lot of buildings out there. Do you know where the distribution center is?
Mm-hmm.
It's on 17th South,
Yeah.
out there. That whole area was military armory, where they made rifles, ammunition. They had little bunker things that they held all that. Where have you ever worked at the furniture factory of the church?
Mm-hmm.
They have where the distribution center across the street is. They make mattresses, bunk beds. They sell at the distribution center. They teach people how to work and do things. They have full-time people there. Bless you. Except our our ward also had assignments to go work there. Those are all military type bunkers. They're cement buildings. And that's where they did make some of that. But that whole complex, it was all fenced. You had to have a badge to get in and out.
Well, and then up in Brigham City, they had all those. Up in Brigham City, they had all those camps where they brought all the Japanese.
No, they were the Italians.
Well, they did have one with Japanese too. Where did they take them? I thought that was up there.
No, they took them out in Twilla area.
Anyway.
Yeah, that was a terrible camp out there. Anybody that was an American, born and raised here, they thought some of those were
might have been spies
against the United States, and so they put an internment camp out there. And they every year, the Japanese, I think they've built
Memorial.
Yeah, memorial out there. But in Brigham City, it was the Italians, because they used to come down here and play soccer against. My father was a soccer player, and my uncles, and so they always had soccer teams. They had them from Germany, Sweden, Norway. Had soccer teams. They had them from Germany, Sweden, Norway, and the Italians came. And when I was about 10 years old, my dad always took us Saturdays. That's when they played. But that was fun. That's why I'm interested in soccer. Even a lot of people don't like soccer at all, but I do.
So, I was going to say something. I forgot it. What were you saying right before the soccer thing?
The internment camps.
Oh yeah, did you know any of the Japanese or Italians, like in your neighborhood or anything?
That they had put in places like that? No, I didn't know any.
Did you ever hear of anyone's friends or?
Well, I knew the people I worked for, the Italians.
Oh, true.
No, but the people that were
In the neighborhood.
neighbors and that.
I don't know if there was any Italians in our neighborhood, because the Italians, they at one time were with the Germans, but that's when they had Mussolini. But Mussolini, he got overrun, and I think the Italians killed him, and because they knew Hitler was bad, but you see, they had an army though, and so they were probably good people, but they shipped them here, and they had barracks, and then after they were shipped back, they made it an Indian school, and they had a lot of Navajos and all kinds of Indians there. And then they said that was racist, and they want them back into the.
Well, and when we were younger, as I walked to primary and to church, you'd see stars in people's windows in different colors, and it meant that they had somebody in the army, or they'd had somebody that died, or if they had anybody in the war, they had some kind of a star. And they posted it, put them in their windows, and so you knew.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was kind of sad to walk and see.
During World War II, you could drive down the roads and everything and see it had about that. And if you had one or two stars, that means two people in the same family.
Yeah.
And pretty soon when that happened, then they didn't want families to. If they had one death, they tried to minimize it by sending them out and doing military, but not in a war zone.
That's kind of nicer that they started doing that. What do you remember? What was like the most happiest, joyous time in your life?
I don't remember being happy.
there wasn't any certain time you remember being.
I mean, there are tons of things that when you were happy that I can't, maybe when we went on the motorhome and took our kids,
Yeah.
because we'd never ever done anything like that, and that was really fun for us to take our kids and go to California. We wished we could have taken Lynn and Steve with us, but we couldn't, so.
Well, you go through life.
But I can't remember that, really, we had a lot of things that we did that was fun.
You have high points, low points in your life, and you just hope you have more highs than lows.
So do you remember any of the low points?
Low points?
Any of the major low points and what you learned from
When
them?
you have death in families where your uncles are meaningful, when you see when they have to go to care centers where they get dementia. My own father got dementia, and I went there almost every night to the care center, and he passed away, I think, 5 months. And of course I worked in a funeral home, so as soon as he passed away, I went personally up there to the funeral home and got the vehicle to pick him up and took him. And when my mother died, I went and did the same thing, picked him up. I set up the funerals. I did everything, worked the viewings, and made sure everything was taken care of 100%.
Well, they lived together, and the kids were all gone. So it got to the point that they couldn't take care of each other. I mean, she had to do most of the taking care of.
Yeah.
And he would fall, and when she was trying to help him, he would fall down, and then she couldn't get him up. And so, you have to eventually put him somewhere where they can be taken care of, because it was hard.
So they both moved in together?
No, we just put him in a care center.
Oh, okay.
And he would call her all the time
And
and tell her to come and get him.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hard.
And that was hard. So then eventually took her. We'd take her Corny and I'd take her for 2 weeks, and then Jack and Sherry would take her, and then Jeanette would take her for 2 weeks. And we did that with her and switched her around to each home. We did that for like 2 years, about 2 years. Maybe.
When was that? I feel like I remember.
Do you remember that?
I remember someone being here knitting the hangers.
Oh, yeah. That's what she did, because she had degenerative eye disease. She couldn't hardly see, but she could see black and white. And she took that bedroom, Joan's bedroom, and she lived there. So she went downstairs, and so at nighttime, though, I'd make sure that if she needed help, I'd get up, because she would have had her all day.
Yeah. I remember she'd always call me Tyler.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And she'd call Jeffy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But
Well, and she always called Greg.
Really?
She never ever got that right.
yeah.
Were there any lessons you learned from those hard times putting your dad in the center and everything?
Well,
I don't want to have to go in the home myself.
well, I took him from the hospital to the care center in the car. Took him from the hospital to the care center in the car. I had to take him. I made arrangements for him, and he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "We're going to take you in a little place where they can give you some rehab." He said, "No, I don't want to. I want to go home." I said, "Dad, you got to come here. We got nurses and people that take care of you." And boy, he had a hard time. So I went there every day for a long time. And every time I came, he said, "I want to go home." I'd always have to leave him and say, Dad, I'll come back tomorrow and see how you're doing. But they didn't take care of him good. At night times he'd get up and he'd fall. And after being there about 5 months, he got up in the middle of the night and lost his balance and fell on the coffee table that had sharp edges.
Oh no.
And so they took him, they sent for the ambulance, sent him up to St. Mark's Hospital, and nobody's on duty at 1 o'clock in the morning, but they called us, and my brother and I went up there and had to hold him while they stitched. Oh, his whole ear had been ripped, and it hurt him so bad. They couldn't even, they gave him a shot, but your ear doesn't
Numb.
take shot. Yeah, it doesn't numb. And anyway, then after they got it all stitched and everything, they said, let's take him in and have an x-ray to see if he broke his neck or hit his. And so anyway, we took him and we said, now, Dad, you stay still. We had to run out when he snapped it and run back because he was really in bad pain. Well, anyway, we took him back that night in the care center, and within about 3 days, he died. And the reason is he lost his will to live because it was no fun in getting punished for the things they didn't do anything for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
So
sad.
that
Yeah, care centers aren't fun places to take people. I cry every time I went up to see my sister. I could hardly.
But anyway, you have to have some places to do it. But I was, and they charge tremendous prices.
Oh, yeah.
He had 90 days where the government paid under the insurance, and then they were charging $10,000 to $12,000 for his care, which was just outrageous on some of the things they did. And then we had to pay the next 2 months personally. So we went over the bills and we said, okay, we don't want this. It was called, that exercise, physical type exercise, and then there was a mental exercise. And we said discontinue every one of those, and that took about $5,000 off the bill.
Wow. Monthly?
Yeah.
Wow.
And anyway, we wanted it down around 5,000, which even was too much.
Yeah.
But anyway, then about 60 days later, after we had settled up with them, we had paid the 2 months and everything, they sent us another extra bill for extra services and that, and we said, sue us. We're not paying this. We paid everything and we feel like we overpaid.
Mm-hmm.
I said, he died because of your, carelessness and not watching him when he fell. So they never did do anything. And I wouldn't ever go to that care center either.
Which one was it?
Well, there aren't a lot that are good.
But no, there's so many care centers in this town, you're overwhelmed with how many there is.
Yeah.
There's
I
hundreds.
think people are just getting rich with having care centers. We have a house over here. If you go down our street and then turn and go straight past this first street and then past the second street, there's a great big, huge, huge.
The new one?
A new one.
They
have care center. They have a care center.
Really?
a couple of them, but they have a child that's
They have a child that has a problem, but you know darn well that they've made tons and tons of money.
Well, that's not something else.
Well,
Okay, what are you most grateful for in your life?
In their life,
Mm-hmm.
be born to get a body, and to hope that our life has been well accepted, and we'll live for it. And
Do you agree, Grandma?
I guess our family and all the blessings that we've had. Sometimes I'm amazed that so we have so many good things happen to us, and that our family is so good to us. And I think, you know, I don't know how, if we really deserve have all the things that we have, especially when you hear all these bad things in the world happening.
Mm-hmm.
And all the earthquakes and all this, and I think we are so blessed. We have so much.
And we have to say happy birthday to Carolyn. It's
Yeah.
been a privilege having her. She's been a
She has really been a
tremendous
wonderful
asset.
daughter. She has been a wonderful, wonderful daughter.
Yeah. And Don has more.
And Dawn too.
More.
You know, I don't know what we would do without those two, and sometimes I feel like, you know, it isn't fair that she should have the burden of us all the time.
It's not a
But we don't
burden.
have any place else to go because she's the only one close now. And I mean, you know, Jill's the next one closest, I guess, but Jill wouldn't really want us to come out there. I think where Carolyn seems to welcome us.
Yeah, she always wants you to come.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
We're
Yeah.
very fortunate to have her as a daughter.
And Don has been an excellent son-in-law.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, and you know, and Tracy's a good daughter too, and she would do it if she didn't live so far. And Kurt has been really good to us, and Joni and Keith, you know, and Lynn and Steve were always good to us.
Yeah.
And Billy takes us to El Ferrell's every week.
No, he doesn't do it.
Every
so
other
wild. No, he
Billy could step up his game.
Weekly.
Just kidding.
anyway.
Oh, Billy's good to us. He really is. And Corey's been really good to us. Of course, he doesn't live here now, but Corey's always been really good to us. All of our kids have. We've been blessed with really good children.
Do you have any words of wisdom that you would want to share with the younger generation, your grandkids, great-grandkids?
I've already said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just remember that your parents truly love you, and that anything that they do want you to do is because it's good for you and not for them. That they want you to do it for them. And sometimes I think they feel like they're doing things for their parents when really they're doing them for themselves. You know, Corny never went on a mission, and I always have felt like he wished, but would have been wished that he could have gone on a mission. I don't, you know,
Well, you could go on one now
he's never really said that.
by yourself.
But I did do a mission, thank you.
Our mission has been.
I did a genealogy mission for 2 years.
Yeah, she spent that on the computer.
I got tell a little bit about that too.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Oh, it was right before I was Relief Society president. 2 years. The 2 years before I was Relief Society president.
Yeah.
And then how old were you when you were called to be Relief Society president? Do you remember?
70 something. 5.
Probably about 76 maybe. I said, I'm almost 80.
Yeah.
To be a Relief Society president. You're not a day over 60.
You think you'd be out of it by then?
And I was just like a Relief Society.
No, you weren't. You think
assistant.
you were.
That guy wasn't.
No, you weren't, Corny.
I was in the high priest group, and
And you did your job.
I had my services to do too. I went
Yeah.
to every work assignment there was.
And you're snow blowing. You do the whole neighborhood.
I still did it. Yeah. Anyway, anytime we had funerals, we were there. She was in charge, but I was doing set up chairs
Yeah.
and all that stuff, cleaning. That's why I say I was an assistant religious society worker.
Hey, assistant's better than the actual thing. Will we explain moving from the grocery store to the mortuary, how that all happened?
Oh, well, what happened? Let's see. Oh, I was in the food brokerage business for about 2.5, 3 years with some lines that I had acquired, and I had a little rental office. It cost me $75 to $100 a month rent, and they used to take my phone calls, and I traveled clear up to Boise, Idaho, and Pocatello, and around Utah, and called on all the key accounts.
Do you know what a brokerage is?
No.
They have different lines. He would get these different lines from companies. He had to go out and get these lines, see if he could sell their line,
Of products?
their product,
Okay.
and then he would
And
have to
then I
go
would
sell
get a
them all.
commission on it. And
Okay.
But they weren't big commissions. They were 5%, 7.5%, or 10%. And
So were you
Anyway,
selling them to
I-
grocery stores?
He
Or
would sell their product to grocery
okay,
stores.
to the grocery store.
But I went to key accounts like their offices, say Albertson's office,
Mhm.
Safeway's office. They used to be in this market. They aren't anymore. But you went to Associated Foods, which is Dan's and Macy's, and what do you call that one over there on the corner? It used to be
The fresh market?
Fresh Market. All those are Associated Food accounts. And if you get your product in their warehouses, then they can order it out, see. And then Western Family Macaroni, you ever heard of that?
Mhm.
I represented that line. And I made $2,500 a month on that. That's how big an account it was at one time. But they took it away from me because I was a small broker. I was a one-man operation. They want 10 men out there. So I lasted about 3 years before I lost my accounts, but I went to work for another broker and took my lines to him so I wouldn't lose them. But he promised me a lot of things and it didn't work out, and I walked out the door 11 months. So then I went to work for a bakery called Pacific Bay. A friend of mine owned it from San Francisco. He was a semi-driver for our company, and he had a lot of money. He married a woman that inherited millions, and so he said, I love Utah. I want to come up here and start a bakery. He says, I got some like an adopted fellow that he set up the bakery, and it lasted about 30 years, but then he died, and the fellows that were running it, I think, were taking the money out of it and didn't show them any profit. So,
But you weren't there for 30 years.
Well, I only worked there for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But I left the company, and then it was just a few short years after that they realized that that company wasn't making any profit for the family. They were making a profit, but it was going into the people that run it, the county department, the guy that was the head man. And anyway, they closed it. They just closed it right down. Came up their attorneys said we're closing this, and whoever was working there and honest lost their jobs. But
Wow.
they made beautiful bread. We used to sell Market Street grills and broilers and grocery stores and everything. They'd buy Market Street Grill up downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Used to go 500 loaves in a day or two.
Wow.
On the weekends, they'd go 100 to 200 on a regular day.
What was the name of the bakery?
Pacific Bay Baking.
Okay.
It's not even there. People don't even know it exists. But it was a sourdough French bread. And they made it wonderful. Raisin bread. Oh, they're trying to think what else they had. It was a pretty good company. But then I went to the funeral. In the meantime, I had started my print deal.
Oh yeah.
My neighbor lived next door, and he says, "Hey, if you want to invest in this machine, I've got some jobs I can give you." So I did. I invested, and it took us 3 years to pay off that machine. We put it in his garage at first, but he said, "That's not a good place. I work for the company, and I can't be having a print machine in there." I said, "Okay," so we put it in our garage, half of it. And
Well, we built the garage.
just a minute. We had
right.
that for a couple of years in there. And then we said the only way we can expand and make any money is we got to have some other kinds of machines. So then we got, we went ahead and I actually built it. I dug the footings and built everything and ordered the trusses and put them all up and got it all done, and then I bought a couple extra machines and put in there and worked together. But that lasted about 12 years, and then the computers came out and ruined the business.
So what were you printing?
Checks for
Oh, that's right.
different companies, quick checks and stuff. Like if somebody had to order a check, it'd take them 2 or 3 weeks to get it.
Mm-hmm.
I can get it in 2 days.
And it wasn't like a printer where it goes through a printer and prints. It was like a stamping thing.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't
Right. It was a continuous press that was stamp impression. True.
And then how'd you find out about the how'd you get into working at a mortuary?
Well, a fellow told me at the bakery, he said, "Why don't you go to," he said, "I hate this delivering bread." He said, "I only work part-time here anyway, a couple of days a week." He said, "I went down to the Wasatch Lawn," he said, "and sold cemetery lots." Down to the Wasatch Lawn, he said, and sold cemetery lots. And he said they give you commission for doing it. So one day, when I quit the bakery, I just quit it. And I went down there, and the guy hired me. And it was a tough road to start because you had to sell. But the first month, I sold 20 lots. And I made enough to keep going, but then they asked me to come into the funeral home and do services and viewings and things, and I did that too, but I sold funeral plans, and when you're working with people, if you have a death in the family, you work with that family, they'll come back to you and say, "I'd like to buy other cemetery spaces for my parents," or whatever. And so that's how I got interested. And I worked there till I was just almost 75.
Well, and then too, when he changed jobs and that, then we didn't have insurance. So that's why I went to work at the college.
Yeah.
And basically at first, I was just working. I wasn't really even making any money, so they were just paying my insurance. They did a lot of things different when I first started. They did a lot of things that they didn't do later. And then I started earning some money, but then they started giving me the retirement, putting money in a retirement plan for me too, which they didn't do later on for the part-time people. But
That's nice.
yeah, I was really lucky to get that because we've been really fortunate to have that now.
So you still have that?
Yeah.
That's nice.
And
The
so,
only thing is, if she dies first, I don't get any.
but, we needed the full amount.
Yeah.
And you had to make a decision. They let you could take this amount or this amount and do this or do this, So I just thought, okay, I'll just take the full thing, and it's just a gamble. This works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So,
And that is a blessing, yeah.
and Corny felt like he was getting cheated.
Well, the important,
But he doesn't realize that we couldn't have lived without it.
Yeah.
well, the important part is retirement, and my company didn't give out. I had a profit sharing company, and I got over $50,000, but $50,000 was reinvested, and we lost it all. And so, what I should have done is put it into a rollover profit sharing plan that you didn't touch.
Mm-hmm.
And because I took it and put it someplace, the government took 15% off the top. So that's losing, and then the rest was reinvested and was lost.
Oh, wow.
So you don't want to touch retirement programs. You want to build on.
Well, when you're younger, you don't think
Yeah.
that you're going to need that. You're earning money and you're thinking you can always earn money. So it's really not that important. But yeah, now that we're older, I especially can see that we should have done things different.
Well, that's because we had big families.
Yeah.
But it's people that made investments over time and more. Her brother has done very well through that profit sharing plan.
Well, he stayed there, and then not only that, but my folks, when they passed away, gave him the home,
Oh, that
our
helps.
home. So
Oh yeah, that. Well, he had some advantages.
yeah,
He only had one child. It's a lot different.
we're okay.
Okay, next question.
Next question: when do we go home?
No. What would you say is some of your talents and or hobbies? What are you good at, and what do you enjoy to do?
Go ahead. She's got all the talents.
No, I don't have all the talents. I've always sewed. That was a talent when I was younger, but I don't do it much anymore. I'm a good mender. People bring mending things to me because I can make things look like they're really mended good.
Sewed her wedding dress.
Matter of fact, one time when I mended Billy's pants when he was younger, and you know how kids like holes in their pants.
Uh-huh.
I mended these corduroy pants so you could not even see where there was a big hole in them.
Yeah.
And I was so proud of the job that I had done. And he looked at him and he said, I didn't want you to sew up that hole. I wanted that there.
That's funny.
So anyway, yeah. And I've always loved to work.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm kind of a workaholic. And Corny loves to visit.
I like to enjoy life. I don't like to work all the time.
Well, and I'm happy if I'm working.
Yeah.
I really like to keep busy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I can think I've got something to do today, oh good, I can get that done.
Yeah.
I know, and that's the pits.
Well,
That's her. That's why we're opposite.
yeah,
And gardening.
yeah, huh?
Gardening, that's a big talent, I'd say.
Yeah.
Got a green thumb.
But I'm a morning person.
He's a morning person,
That's
I'm
why.
and I'm
That's
late.
why I get up and leave.
He
'Cause
gets
she's
up.
not.
He gets up at 5 o'clock every morning,
Wow.
whether he has to or not. 5 o'clock, you have to get up. You have to go out and get the newspaper, and if the newspaper isn't there, he's upset with the lady for not being there. He's wondering, where is she?
Well, this morning they had a substitute say she's 1 hour late.
Wow.
To bring in the newspaper. So then he goes after he does that, and he's gone like about this morning. It was like quarter to 8, because I have that thing now on that monitor on my phone that shows anybody going in and out of the house, so I know exactly what time he leaves now. I think, oh, okay, he left at 7:42. Okay. And I don't have to get up until later.
That's funny.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a piece of tape over the camera.
Tracking your every move.
No, and it's fine with me that he gets up and goes. I don't object to that at all. I'm glad he has these McDonald friends, I call them.
Yeah, sometimes they're not there, but that's fine. I like them when they're not around sometimes.
So do you go to McDonald's or do you go walking? What do you do in the mornings?
Well, I used to go walking a lot
Mm-hmm.
down the parkway here, but I've slowed up on that. I don't walk that much. But I go over to the mall and walk around there inside, and I like to go see different things, visit.
Mm-hmm.
I go to this McDonald's down on 41st South. They've remodeled that inside. It's a lot better than it ever used to be.
Yeah.
Their food isn't that great,
But he's seen a lot of his friends that he knew through the years.
yeah, there's people over there I know.
Yeah.
Do you get the same thing every day?
No, I get, sometimes just a breakfast burrito. They only cost $1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I might have 2 of them or something. Sometimes I get what is known as a sausage McMuffin with no egg. That's only $1.
Mm.
And I don't like to spend a lot of money in a place that's just mediocre, but it's all right. I've had their breakfast, and it costs $5.40, where at the other costs $3 1/4. You get a large drink and that, but it's just, a lot of people go to those places, drive-throughs, and of course they order a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
But I'm there to visit. I just soon come home and eat something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I have to take something to take some pills.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions? Do you have anything else you want to add to your life?
I think we've talked about everything that.
Yeah, we've told all our secrets. We've bared our soul.
One last question. What did you do at the college exactly?
Oh, I started out, when I went to high school, I took shorthand.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called Greg shorthand. And then when I went...
Is that for taking notes? Or what is
it's what you just take notes.
Okay.
Okay, so then when I went to a couple of classes before I started working there, I took another shorthand. And that was a different kind of a shorthand, a different name, and it was different. You didn't do the same kind of short things, as you did. And so then when I got hired, it was Steve's mother was over the department, Steve Larson.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was over the nursing department, and she was over the complete department. So she hired me on just to work and correct papers. And that's how I started.
Okay.
And because I knew shorthand, 3 different versions of shorthand, I could correct 3 different kinds of shorthand. So that's what I did a lot of it for probably a couple of years. And as soon as I started working there, like I said, even working part-time, I got the insurance.
Yeah.
And they started putting money in for my retirement. So then I went on farther, and then I went over into into the other building, and I started working with the computers. I was still doing the shorthand and correcting and that, but I started taking these classes on the computer, and then they weren't computers. They were dedicated word processors, and it just clicked with me.
Really.
I mean, I just could understand everything it was doing. It was just so easy for me it just fit in for me the way that a computer is.
Yeah.
And even some of the teachers were taking the class with me, and they couldn't really understand a lot of things. And so I was helping them do things. So then we had the dedicated computers first. Then we started getting computers, and I had to go over and load all the stuff on the computers, and I had never done anything like that. I just took them out of the boxes and loaded them and loaded the hard drives and everything, and just started doing it. And it was just
Wow.
And then that's when I started working with all the students, just helping them with their programs, because I'd learned all the programs when I was taking classes with the teachers. We learned all the different programs, and so I would just go around and help students.
So I would say that's another talent. If it just came to you like that.
Well, I really could, I just couldn't understand how come all those ladies couldn't just understand what we were doing. Don't you understand that? It was just natural to me.
All right. Anything else that you want on the record?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Would you like a roll or a drink or anything? I think we're good.